Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the kitchen. We're going to make Japanese vegetable tempura today. So I have the beginnings of our mise en place sitting out here. We're going to be using these different tools. We've got the peeler, the microplane zester, our chef's knife, and this great handy gadget. I'm going to show you, this is what we're going to use to cut the carrots and the zucchini into a nice shape. Our cutting board, our box grater, and we have ginger, onion, carrots, zucchini, an egg, the kabocha squash, daikon radish, fresh daikon, not the pickled daikon that we used for the maki rolls, but fresh daikon radish, our soy sauce, mirin, and our sesame oil, flour, and salt, sugar. So we're going to start off with 4 cups of canola oil, and we're just going to put in a small amount of sesame oil, and that will give it enough flavor to impart the Japanese traditional flavors of tempura. And then, unfortunately, I was unable to get quite a few of the ingredients that I was hoping to get. The Japanese sweet potato I wasn't able to get. I got the kabocha squash, but I couldn't find any lotus root. The specialty mushrooms were not there. Unfortunately, if you recall, the sisho leaves froze and were no longer usable that I got to make our ume sisho maki. So I kind of was a little disappointed I wasn't able to get all of those, but I instead was able to get a zucchini, which is great to make tempura with. And then I was looking in our refrigerator here in the school, and just like abuela, and when I was Puerto Rican, I was trying to figure out what I had that I could use. And so, of course, we still had the carrots from our carrot cucumber maki. I had some onion, and there is another type of tempura which is called I'll have to look it up. I have to pronounce it properly. Kakiage Tempura. And it is like a dumpling or a fritter almost. It's very thin strands of the carrot, thin strips of onion, and I'm going to put in thin strips of the zucchini, and it's made like a fritter. So we're going to do that since I had these ingredients. So remember, you can always supplement whatever you're making with whatever you have in the refrigerator. Now, another thing is that our tempura dipping sauce calls for dashi, which is a Japanese soup stock made with kombu. Kombu is seaweed, and unfortunately, I was not able to get kombu or dashi. You can buy dashi in powder form and just make it quickly. So instead, I do have the soy sauce, we do have the mirin, the sugar, and the daikon radish. But since we're missing the dashi, that's why I've got the ginger out. I'm going to add a little bit of ginger, and that'll help give it flavor. There is no ginger in dashi, but since I want to get more of that Asian flavor, since I'm missing the seaweed, I wanted to supplement it with something else, another Asian flavor, and that is definitely ginger. So you have to remember what ingredients can you substitute for other things. So in case you don't have something, well, what else can we do? All right, so that's one of the challenges of being in the kitchen, and you always have to be able to think on your feet and come up with a solution. So I'm going to start getting all of our mise en place together and show you how to make this. So this is the carrot that I used yesterday to make those thin strands with that specialty peeler that I had. And so it ended up that the carrot is kind of rectangular, which is great because now I can slice it easily. So I cut it into, we're going to make strips, so I cut it into similar sized pieces. And now I'm going to start cutting them this way, and then I'll rotate them and cut them this way, and I'll get nice fine matchstick type shape cuts. All right, so now you can see how I've been cutting that. So we started off with a rectangular piece. I cut very thin strips this way, and now I'm cutting very thin strips this way. And so you're getting these very fine matchstick pieces of carrot. Okay, so I want to get the the zucchini about the same size as our carrots, and we're going to do fine matchsticks of zucchini for our kakiage tempura. That's how you say it, kakiage tempura. That's the dumpling style. And then the rest of the eggplant I'm going to cut with this, and so you'll see what it looks like. So I'm cutting thin strips of the zucchini just like I did with the carrot, and then I will cut them in long matchstick sizes as well. Now for our onion, we're gonna cut it, I've cut the top and the bottom off, and we're gonna cut it not this way into half moons, but this way into very thin strips. Okay, so you can see I've been cutting them very thin. All right, and that's what we're looking for, very thin, long strips. So add that to the bowl, and I'll continue chopping. All right, so now we have our zucchini, carrot, and onions together. And one of the keys to making very good tempura is making sure that your vegetables are dry, very dry, no moisture. So I have our cornstarch here, and I'm gonna just coat this with a tablespoon of cornstarch. Cornstarch will create sort of like a dry crust over it, and that'll help keep out the extra moisture. When I make gingerbread houses, I usually put some cornstarch into the royal icing because the royal icing can absorb moisture. And in one year in December, when I was making a gingerbread house for a display piece at the Central Park Conservancy for the mayor's rational animal fundraiser, and NBC News was there, I think, or ABC, one of the news channels were there. My gingerbread house had absorbed a lot of moisture overnight. It was one of those Decembers that were warm and it was raining, and the actual gingerbread house had sort of like sunk, and the roof was beginning to sink in and slide off because the royal icing had absorbed so much moisture. It was like a sponge. So ever since that unfortunate event when it was so critical to make it beautiful, I always put cornstarch in because then it does not absorb extra moisture and have a catastrophe like your gingerbread house falling apart. All right, so that was only 1 tablespoon, and that didn't look like it was enough, so I put in another tablespoon. All right, I'm getting all of this coated, and I'm just using chopsticks to stir it. It helps break up the vegetables. And then when we're ready, we can pour the tempura batter over all of this and then make sort of like little fritters with our vegetables and fry them. All right, so now I'm cutting the vegetables for the regular vegetable tempura. And this is the carrot. I've cut this on the bias, which means on an angle, using this great cutter. And you can see we're cutting it very thin, and we're getting these great cuts on the zucchini. So you simply just put it right here on an angle, as you can see, and then just press right down. Ta-da. And you get that nice slice. I want to keep it thin. So I'm going to finish cutting up the zucchini, and then I'm going to cut up the kabocha squash. Remove the seeds from the center, and then I cut 2 smaller pieces of the kabocha squash. And again, I'm going to slice them very thin. And the rest I'm going to just save. I'll save it for some other recipe since I don't really need to make that much. So I'll cut these very thin. All right, so we're finishing getting up, our vegetables are prepped. Our kakiage is prepped. And now we want to get our dipping sauce made. The last thing we want to do is the batter. The very last thing we want to do is the batter. It fries up much better if the batter is very cold and if the vegetables are just dipped right before being put into the oil. So that is our last step. So we're gonna, remember I don't have the dashi, so we just have 3/4 of a cup of water, and I'm gonna put in 1 teaspoon grated ginger, and we're supposed to do 2 inches of daikon. So here's our daikon, and I'll cut a 2-inch piece and then we'll grate that. So I've already peeled the grater, and I'm gonna grate it on the microplane, and I'm gonna get 1 teaspoon. All right, so I'll be back. Okay, our 1 teaspoon, it's about a heaping teaspoon of grated ginger. Just gotta drop that right in there. And then we need 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. So let me measure that out. All right, so now I'm going to add our 2 tablespoons of mirin, and we'll add that in and stir it all together. All right, so I need a 2-inch piece of daikon radish, and I've got to peel it first, and then I'm gonna grate it on the box grater. I want this type of grate on it. The microplane is too big. The holes are too big, so I definitely want the box grater. And I'm gonna cut it just a little bit bigger than 2 inches, so that way when I'm grating, I don't grate it down very end, my knuckle. All right, so that's about 2 inches, a bit more than 2 inches. Okay, and reserve that for something else. And then I'm gonna peel it. Okay, so as you can see, I'm using the box grater and I'm grating the daikon radish on it. Like so, and when this is all grated, then I will add this into our sauce. All right, so there is our dipping sauce, and it is very good. I probably wouldn't put 3/4 of a cup of water though, maybe just a half a cup of water if I'm not having dashi in future, but it tastes phenomenal. All right, so now you are supposed to make the tempura batter with iced water. So I put this in the freezer when I started, and it's already frozen solid. So anyhow, that's okay, because I actually need ice water to put our batter in to keep it cold. So I'm just gonna let that sit there and mold into our container. I'll get a different measuring cup and measure out. And so cold, you gotta run up until it's cold. And 3/4 of a cup of water. Of course, I can't need a measuring cup, unfortunately.